Here we are at the entrance to the crossroads in Hollow Knight, and if you look closely, you'll see that there's 6 layers of shells at the bottom here. When you move back and forth, you're able to actually see these layers because some of the shells will go on top of each other. That's nothing super complicated, that's just parallax, which is when you can see an object move because of a shift in perspective. Hollow Knight uses this everywhere, and the foreground constantly has these layers, whether it's grass or rocks, and it makes you feel like you're in the middle of this environment instead of just the surface. But what you really might not notice is that below all these layers, below these shells or these rocks or this grass, is a layer of solid black. Most of this platform is solid black. When you look anywhere in the world, you'll start to pick up on this. The center of any large platform is a dark, empty space. Not just that, but black becomes a layer in the environment too. You'll have solid black chains, and black walls, and black grass, and decorations. It's everywhere. Heck, there's some parts of this game where most of your screen is covered in this layer. But your eyes somehow ignore it, and it never feels like it's in the way or like it's stopping you from seeing anything. You might not have even consciously noticed this until I pointed it out, so you're welcome. There's a lot more black overlay to this game than you might realize, and it's all used very intentionally. When you transition from one area of this game to another, the game will fade out to black, and then you make it to the new area and it fades back in. Great, nothing new. But did you notice that before you even enter the next area, the screen will already start to fade on the opposite side? Look, it's fully bright, and then the closer we get to the exit, the more this vignette takes over. So when we finally do pass through that entrance, it never feels like, okay, time to transition. It never breaks that immersion or that state of flow. So flowing from biome to biome, region to region doesn't feel choppy. Not just because of these sexy transitions, but because every time you go from one region to another, you'll be eased into the new assets and the new art of that environment. It doesn't hard cut from the blue shells of the crossroads to the moss and green path. You start by seeing some flowers and some greenery around the entrance. You see some particles. In fact, between almost every 2 regions in this game, there's this space that I want to call a transition room. Like when you go from the crossroads to green path, you'll enter this area. This is one of the most beautiful moments in the whole game, I think, because it's also the first time that you experience this. You start in the crossroads, and you hear the music of that area, you see the blue palette that's associated with that region, the rocks, but then you make it through this little tunnel and you enter this transition area. The music stops, but the same ambient sounds keep going, and after a certain point, the background goes from blue to green. The whole time, there's this cave sound that's progressively getting louder the closer you get to the green path entrance. Listen for a second. Then you leave the transition room, and notice how the left side of your screen is still black, there's still that vignette. But once you start to move forward, it all opens up and it's beautiful. Those transitions happen everywhere, and they're a big part of why the world feels like one giant breathing thing, and not just a bunch of stitched together levels. Building a world like that takes skill. Skill that I think should be shared. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Skillshare is the largest online learning platform for all those creative little ducks like you and me. There are thousands of classes on everything, but especially when it comes to game development, UI design, making music, the business side of it, everything. Now I've been following this Blender 3D texturing class alongside 4,000 other members. It's nice because something like texturing is a more niche topic, so there's not necessarily just going to be a lot of deep dives on it out there in the internet. My 3D modeling skills have always been a little bit questionable, but I'm finally on the road to not completely sucking. Skillshare does let you learn by doing, so you'll be regularly completing projects after finishing a class. A class taught by an industry expert, by the way, not just a random YouTuber like me. Disgusting. Who wants to hear that? I mean, there's of course a Skillshare class out there if you want to learn how to do YouTube. But I'm just saying. I've been really enjoying Skillshare, and millions of other creative brains out there do too, whether it is game development that you want to do or not. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So go get started today. Thank you Skillshare for sponsoring, and let's get back to Hollow Knight. Now, aesthetics are obviously a big reason of why Hollow Knight feels the way it does. But why it feels so fun to play, I think, is because of the movement. We have to talk about the fine-tuned, tailored movement here, guys. Specifically, the exact physics that go into making platforming feel the way that it does. I talked a little bit about this in a previous video, but I want to dive a little deeper. When you look at a platforming game, it's not just having a character that can jump, collide with walls, and move back and forth. That would feel very static and unsatisfying because it feels like you don't have a lot of control. So the first thing we have to do is add a variable jump height. Okay, so now when we tap the jump button, we'll do a little hop, and then if we hold it, we'll jump a lot farther. Great. Gravity is also at play here. We go up, we go down, but we actually want more than that. What makes the jump more satisfying is if we actually hang in the air for a little bit at the peak of the jump, and then perhaps we fall down faster than we jumped up. So our jump goes from looking like this to this. The next thing we have to do is recognize that humans are not perfect, and that if you expect people to be able to continuously jump and perfectly time every jump for when they contact the platform, you're gonna get a very angry player base. So instead, we have to implement jump queuing, which means even if you aren't fully on the ground yet, you should still be able to queue your next jump. Games that don't have this tend to feel very unresponsive and clunky, which is the last thing you want in a genre where you need to feel in control. Another thing we need to do, knowing humans aren't perfect, is add coyote time, which is basically how far your character can be off the edge of a platform, but still be able to jump. It's literally like those cartoons with the coyote that's chilling off the edge of a ledge, but he hasn't fallen yet. It's cute as heck, but we need that. And we also need to catch ourselves on the edges of ledges if we don't perfectly land on them. Or shape the ledges themselves so that they don't have blunt corners, but they're round capsules. That way, if you land right on the corner of a platform, you won't just smack into it and fall, because that's not fun, but you'll actually nudge yourself up onto it. Awesome, so jumping feels a lot better now, but we finally, lastly, need momentum. Momentum in games requires three main things. Number one, keeping the player in motion even after they release the run key, which, if you passed the 5th grade, congratulations, you might know is called inertia. 2, having the start of your run slowly increase before you reach a top speed. And 3, changing the horizontal length of a player's jump based on their prior running speed. Very nice, we did it. Now we have a platformer that feels responsive and feels satisfying. Now, Hollow Knight is a masterclass in fine-tuning those numbers and adding little modifiers so that you feel one with this little vessel. You're incredibly bouncy, but you're also accurate and you're nimble, and it feels fun to just jump around even without an objective. In the same way, it feels fun to just swing your sword as you're walking through an area and destroy things, because even the environment is incredibly responsive. It's not just a responsive movement system that this game has, but every interaction feels that way. Little fun fact, if you destroy the sign that's at the entrance to the crossroads, there's a small chance every time you re-enter the area that this guy named Menderbug is gonna come and refix the sign. He's very cute, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. And notice that when you do destroy some object in the world, either it won't destroy all the way, or if you do destroy it all the way, then you'll get some exaggerated animation. Like when you swing around and cut grass, it doesn't just disappear, you get this explosion of particles. It's like confetti, it's throwing a little party over there. Every time you hit something, destroy something, or kill something, you're left with some residue that tells you your actions had an impact. It's that really subtle incentive to interact with the world, even if it takes the form of a sound effect. Play this game and pay attention to the sheer variety of sound effects and how different they are depending on what material you're interacting with. That is not something that's unique to Hollow Knight, and I know that, but it is something that I especially have grown to appreciate after taking a sound design class this semester. One of the last assignments for this class involved taking away the audio from a scene in a video game and then replacing all the audio with our own sounds. So naturally, obviously, I chose the Mantis Lord's fight from Hollow Knight. I started by stripping away the audio and then figuring out how many sound effects I would need to recreate everything in the scene. It turns out, a lot. Think about every attack, every step from you and the enemy, every background sound, having a variety of attack and step sounds so that your ears don't get tired listening to the same thing. I ended up adding all of this to my sound editing timeline, and in the end, my recreation sounded like this. Isn't that really weird, knowing what the original sounds like? Anyway, what a lot of games will do is, like, for a walking sound, they'll take a single step and then just randomize the pitch of that step every time you walk. So instead of needing to have like 10 different walking sounds, you can just randomize it. I could not do that for this assignment, but nonetheless, I learned a lot, and I realized just how good the sound design is in this game. And that's for both diegetic and non-diegetic sounds. Now, diegetic sounds are sounds that exist solely for you, the player, and don't really happen in the game world. So your UI sounds, which are so crisp in Hollow Knight, by the way, oh my gosh, but also like your music, your background track. And then non-diegetic sounds are technically anything that like the characters would hypothetically also be able to hear. Your attacks, your walking sounds, that stuff. Or for example, the sounds that my favorite NPC in the entire game makes. This guy. This is the Hive Knight. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you. If you ever watched my streams of this game back in the day, you know I was an absolute simp for this dude. He is my absolute favorite. He's a cutie patootie. He's everything that I need in a man. Even if he obviously skips leg day, it doesn't matter, okay? He's perfect. He will make the cutest little buzzing sounds when you fight him. It's cute because it's not just sounds that are like in response to him getting hit, though he does make those sounds too. He does whimper when you hit him. I'm being quiet so my roommates don't hear me. He does whimper when you hit him, which is intriguing to say the least. And the developers added in these noises very intentionally to give him a personality that he might have never really had otherwise. Like, really think about how intentional everything in this game is, even from a mechanical design perspective. Look at the soul meter, for example. I think it's called the soul meter, the thing that stores your soul. They could have easily broken down that gauge into concrete sections or charges. You know, you hit an enemy, you get a charge, that's how you'd kind of expect things to go. But instead, it's a lot more of a fluid container. And as a result of that, you'll find yourself hitting enemies and actively checking whether you have enough soul. And during fights, it feels a lot more intense than knowing, okay, gotta hit him 3 times and then I get my heal. Like, that is a design choice in and of itself, and it's tiny, but it changes the way it all feels. Think about how there's no damage numbers that show up on screen. There's no boss health bars. There's no death screen. There aren't levels. You never really know how many units of damage you're doing at any given point, but you can still upgrade. It's just not numerical. That's intentional, and changing any of those things would, I think, give the game a completely different feel. If there were damage numbers and there were health bars and you could see the amount of charges you had in your soul, it would definitely, I think, feel more grindy and more RPG-like. You wouldn't really feel that satisfaction of killing bugs that used to take 3 hits in 1. The mystery of all of that is the point. When you don't know how many hits this boss can tank, any one feels like it could be the last. And then as you play, as you fight, you slowly kind of pick up on what it feels like to be close to killing it. In the same way, when you upgrade your weapon, you don't know exactly how much more damage you do, but you feel it. You feel it because you know how long it has taken you to kill things in the past, and now you're not getting juked on. It all points to how good this game is at showing instead of telling, or feeling instead of telling. It's the exact same way that the story is presented to you. You are very rarely just told things about the world. You are shown them, and you experience them. In the story behind Hollow Knight, there's a lot to it, but there's this infection happening that comes from this divine higher being called the Radiance. She's a queen. We love her. That infection isn't super obvious to you at first, but once you progress further into the game, it starts to visibly take over the world and infect different bugs. You see these yucky little orange bubbles pop up, and routes that were previously open are now sealed shut by the infection. Now, does the game tell you that this disease is spreading? Sure, but very sparingly, because it cares a lot more about physically showing you how it is evolving. That's generally referred to as environmental storytelling, and it's one of the concepts that Hollow Knight uses so well. Because think about it, there's very few proper cutscenes in this game. You're very rarely being told, okay, this is who you are, this is what you're doing, this is your business, go do your thing, this is your thing. You start the game with this abstract poem, and then you take the form of the vessel, you wander around, and then you get to piece together the scraps of what's happening based on what you find. Like when you come across the White Lady, she's in this area called the Queen's Gardens, she gives you half of the King's soul. You aren't told that she's related to the Pale King, but you can infer that. The same thing happens when you make it to the abyss and you see all the corpses of the other vessels. That moment of, hang on a second. Those moments are what makes games so cool, just looking at it as a whole, as a medium. The idea of showing instead of telling is a thing in books, it's in movies, but outside of video games, it's very rarely ever this interactive. It is art, and as if the rest of this video didn't make it obvious enough, Hollow Knight is art. Especially to me, because the first game that I ever streamed was Hollow Knight. That was a year before I ever started YouTube. Did we do that? Did we just do that? Am I dreaming? This game and the community behind it are absolutely what inspired me to keep doing content and fall in love with indie games and then naturally kind of drift towards game development. I owe so much to the chat of people that guided me through this game, because that opened my eyes to what community can look like for a single player game, what widespread appreciation can look like. Hollow Knight is an objectively good game, that's a fact, that's a bar, but also just has a very warm place in my heart for that reason. I have a little figurine, I have it on my keys, maybe one day I'll have a little subtle Hollow Knight tattoo, who knows. But either way, that's all that I have to say about Hollow Knight. For now. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe if you want. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!